Indy Mogul.
This week on Indie News, I go to Ebertfest, where I'm trying out a low-budget technique called hyperlapsing. I talk to Oliver, the filmmaker who inspired me to try it, how to create a hyperlapse without even picking up a camera, and I finally reveal the subject of the short film I'm producing this summer. Hey Indie Mogulers, Griffin here. Most of the time, when you see camera movement in a time-lapse video, it requires a motion-controlled slider. If most sliders can only move about 3 feet, then how do you get shots like this? Or this? Last week I attended a local film festival where two filmmakers, Chris and Oliver, introduced me to a technique called hyperlapsing. Here's Oliver explaining the trick behind it.
Hyperlapse is like a time lapse with a lot of movement. I guess that's why they call it hyper. The key to having a smooth movement is the camera needs to move by a set interval for each frame. And once in a while you luck out and the sidewalk has bricks, and you can just use that every 2 bricks or whatever. But if you're in a place where there's no markings, then I use a tape measure and some chalk.
With my tripod, tape measure, and chalk, very important that it's Spider-Man chalk, I decided to try hyperlapsing myself, outside the Virginia Theater in Champaign, Illinois, where I attended Roger Ebert's film festival last week. I thought it'd be cool to start behind this tree and see the change in perspective as I moved 25 feet away. Using my chalk, I marked 100 dots on the sidewalk, each exactly 3 inches apart. If I take 100 pictures, one from each dot, it'll take me 15 minutes, and at 24 frames per second, I'll end up with a 4-second shot. So it takes a lot of patience for a short result. My Panasonic GH3 has a built-in intervalometer, a device for time-lapsing, that automatically takes pictures at set intervals. You could also use a remote intervalometer or snap the pictures manually, if you're careful not to shake the camera. I found that a 9-second interval between photos was just enough time to move my tripod. I mounted a laser pointer on my tripod to quickly align the center with each chalk mark. I also need to keep the framing consistent between shots, so using the guidelines on my LCD, I looked for a landmark I could line up with. I always placed these windows in the center, with the top third line touching right here. So I slightly adjusted the tripod for most of the 100 shots. Once I'm done shooting, I load all the photos into Final Cut Pro 10, drop them in the timeline, and hit Ctrl-D1 Enter, which changes the duration of each photo to 1 frame of video. And when I play it back, it looks kinda cool, but really jerky, right? So I tried Final Cut Stabilizer, which helped, but it's still not good enough. Oliver recommends Adobe After Effects Warp Stabilizer, which is amazing. Check it out now, that is so smooth.
Yeah, that stuff is magic. I mean, it's a godsend to filmmakers.
It gets a little hung up on the tree at the beginning. That's why you need consistent framing, so the stabilizer has a reference point to work with. Yesterday, before running a local race, I set up some chalk marks, this time a little bit farther apart, using my white balance card as a spacer. And right after setting a personal record in the 5K while still panting heavily, I grabbed my tripod to capture this. Near the end, I shortened the tripod movements to create a slowdown. It would have looked better had I thought to remove this pair of pants from the fence. It also would have been better if more people showed up at the race. But my biggest issue is that the movement is so jittery. Oliver explains how to solve that.
So I tried to go for a long exposure because I wanted the frames to kind of blend in with each other, and 5 seconds getting some motion blur with each frame kind of helps smooth it over.
I'd love to use a 5-second shutter, which would turn all of this movement into beautiful streaks of light. But it's a bright sunny day and I'm already at my lowest ISO and smallest aperture. To slow my shutter, I'll need a strong ND filter to block all this light from coming in the lens. That's what Oliver does. I have an ND filter, it's actually on that camera right now, but it doesn't fit the lens I was using for this shoot, and it's just not strong enough. After trying sideways movement at only 3 inches at a time, and this curve 1 foot at a time, I attempted a hyperlapse without reference dots, moving the tripod approximately 2 feet forward at a time. Here it is straight from the camera, and here it is stabilized. I think my first attempt looks best, probably because the interval is only 3 inches.
Sometimes moving 2 feet will work in between each frame, and sometimes it doesn't. And I discovered that a lot of it is how far away the subject is and how much foreground there is.
It's a cool effect, but it takes patience. Let's say you want a 10-second shot with 3-inch movements. That's 240 frames with 60 feet of movement. That's going to take you 15 minutes to set up and at least 36 minutes to shoot. Even longer if you want the sun or the clouds to move faster through your time lapse.
A lot of it is trial and error. The first couple I did here locally, I mean, they looked really bad. The effect came across, but I'm like, oh man, I learned a lot. And then even when I was doing it in Italy, a lot of the shots didn't make it because there were mistakes and stuff like that. It kind of stinks because you have to invest like an hour into each shot. I guess that's the joys and the pains of filmmaking.
But if you want a super easy way to do hyperlapse, you don't even need to shoot it yourself. This online tool uses Google Street View images to create some stunning hyperlapses. As you've seen, the last 2 weeks I've spent a bunch of time at local film festivals. It's a great place to meet people and get inspired, but one of the big reasons I'm there is because I want to be showing a film at next year's festivals. And I'm ready to tell you what the film is that I want to make. It's a short documentary film about this, sriracha. Let me know in the comments if you're familiar with this Thai style of hot sauce. It's becoming increasingly popular in the US. There are cookbooks and t-shirts, and they've sold 20 million bottles of these last year. I buy the big, huge bottles because I just love this flavor. I put it on everything. And lots of people do. They don't advertise the stuff, but it's becoming so popular they have to move into a bigger facility to keep up with demand. I think it's a really interesting story, which is why I'm spending this summer making a short documentary, maybe 20 to 30 minutes long. I'm hoping to have it released this fall. In the meantime, I'll put out lots of updates on Indy Mogul, but I encourage you to please like the Facebook page to keep up with production. I'm so excited to make this film and to bring it to you later this year. On this week's playlist, I actually have a new Film Fights entry that Russell and I shot while we were leaving South by Southwest. On our way to the airport, we started shooting this thing around 4 a.m. after not sleeping. Maybe you can tell. I also have a pretty cool hyperlapse from photographer Jeff Tompkinson and a spinning 360 hyperlapse from Candy Glass Productions. I also have... what do I have here? I don't remember. Should I look? Oh yeah, I have the Google Street View hyperlapse right here, and I have this week's new and notable video contests. So thanks for watching, and please join me this Wednesday on the live show at 10 p.m. GMT right here on Indy Mogul.